The proclamation of the Holy Gospel according to Mark. Again Jesus left the district of Tyre and went by way of Sidon to the Sea of Galilee, into the district of the Decapolis. And people brought to him a deaf man who had a speech impediment, and begged him to lay his hand on him. He took him off by himself away from the crowd. He put his finger into the man's ears, and spitting, touched his tongue. Then he looked up to heaven and groaned and said to him, Ephphatha, that is, be opened. And immediately the man's ears were opened. His speech impediment was removed, and he spoke plainly. He ordered them not to tell anyone, but the more he ordered them not to, the more they proclaimed it. They were exceedingly astonished, and they said, He has done all things well. He makes the deaf hear and the mute speak. The Gospel of the Lord.
Our Gospel for today comes from St. Mark. We have been reflecting on God, the God who ends exiles and captivities. In the first reading from the prophet Isaiah, we see God promising Israel that they could come home. And this wonderful message of being led back home, being restored to land, to temple, and to one's identity as God's people is expressed by Isaiah through images of the wonderful things that God would do. The miracles of the restoration of sight to the blind, of hearing to the deaf, of speech to the dumb, of the ability to walk and to dance and to jump to those who are lame, and the desert will again burst forth with life. And in the second reading, we find St. James talking about a way by which we normally send people into exile, by excluding them, by discriminating against them. And St. James says that is not the way that people of faith should behave. Faith should not exclude other people a priori. Faith is expressed in love, especially towards those that the world already excludes, those that the world forgets. Now they are the ones that should be the recipients of Christian love. So through our love, we bring them home. They find a home. They find friends. They find true family among the believers. Now in the Gospel, we find Jesus engaging in such a dramatic fashion by restoring people not only to health, but to community, ending their exile. Here we have the example of a person who had some hearing and speech impediment. People brought him a deaf person who is also mute in order for him to lay his hands on him. Now, when you are deaf, this is an impediment to communication. How those of us who are capable of hearing, we just take it for granted. But if we pause, we realize that through our hearing, we are able to be connected with people. People who address us are at once connected with us. We know that we are being addressed. So the deaf, those with an hearing impairment, they are in a way excluded. They feel that. It is a form, in a way, of exile. And so, it is not just, in a way, a defect of the ear. The more painful experience of those with a hearing impairment is the exclusion, the exile from a community that so easily communicates with one another. And because of the impediment in hearing, they are often also impaired in speech. They fail to hear communication directed to them, and they fail to be communicative, at least through words. And this difficulty in communication is a form of exile. It is a form of exclusion from others. So when Jesus heals a person, deaf and mute, He is actually ending the period of exile, and He restores this person to the community. He leads this person back home. The restoration to health is also the end of exile, and it is a return to the normal habitat of a human person, the community. So, many people who are banished into exile because of these physical impediments become symbols of God's redeeming and saving action. And Jesus did it in a manner that is already indicative that the period of exile is over. He touches the person, touching, reaching out to the person, touching the ear, touching the tongue. The God that Jesus personifies is the God who will establish a connection, communion, communication, as though telling this person with hearing and speech impediments, from now on, God will connect with you, and you will be connected with God and with the community. But Jesus also prayed. Jesus knew that this is the action of a God who wants to dismantle walls that separate us from one another, walls, barriers that make us exclude one another, barriers that make us live virtually in exile. So, dear brothers and sisters, as the second reading reminds us, our faith should not lead us to exclusion of other people. Our faith should not make us instruments of exiles in our time. Let our faith lead us to a love that heals the brokenness of society, a love that is able to open doors to people who are looking for homes and restoration into community. I remember the time when we started the ministry for the hearing impaired, the deaf, and the mute in our parish. And I had a meeting with this community, and through an interpreter, a catechist who knew sign language, I asked them about their participation in the church, and then I learned that many of them have not been married in church, and their children have not been baptized in church. Thinking that they were probably worried about what to wear, and the reception, and sometimes the donation to the church, I communicated to them through the interpreter that they should not worry about those things, that they should just come to the parishes. Okay? So the interpreter communicated to them. And then, through the interpreter again, I got the response. If we go to any parish, is there anyone who could understand us? Who could understand our language? And that made me pause. And I said to myself, yeah, I never considered that. If a deaf person, hearing impaired, with a speech impediment goes to any parish to ask for help in baptism and marriage, will there be any secretary, priest that could receive such a communication? And that started a whole ministry, so that those who are in exile who'd come home. And I'm appealing to all of you. Let us be sensitive to the many, many people who are living in exile because they have not been given the opportunity to be part of any community. The word has been exposed. Let us now fulfill it.